City of Stevens Point Sustainability Commission meeting, recorded September 4th, 2025.
Okay, it is 5:30. We're going to begin the meeting for the Stevens Point City Sustainability Commission. And we'll start with the roll call. Doug Stingle.
Aye. Are present.
Heather Phelps.
Present.
Alderman Allison Beer.
Here.
Greg Knight is here. Alderman Sam Lang.
Here.
And Robert Mitch.
Present.
Okay, so everyone's here. We've got one guest, Alderman 4, Laura Broderick. Woo-hoo. And we have our speaker for tonight, Adam Kuhn. So we'll, first of all, we'll say, are there any persons here who wish to address the Sustainability Commission on a specific agenda item? Must be registered the request at this time. Is there anyone here? Okay. And then number 3 is persons who wish to address the Sustainability Commission on non-specific agenda items must register the request at this time. So if we don't have any of that, then we'll move on to our agenda item number 4, which is approval of the meeting minutes of June 5th, 2025 meeting of the Sustainability Commission. Were there any edits or additions or corrections? If not, a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Okay, Sam to approve, and who will second that? Second by Robert. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. That's approved. And then item number 5 then will be our presentation from Adam Kuhn, Associate Planner, Zoning Administrator. Speaking on zoning code rewrite updates on the city's greenhouse gas inventory.
All right, thank you, Chair. So I'll split up the presentation twofold. First, talking about the zoning code rewrite, and then segueing over to the greenhouse gas inventory. I did not include anything in the packet for you, more because I like to kind of fly by the seat of my pants and speak more ad lib. So we're going to roll with that. So before I talk kind of specifically about zoning and sustainability principles within zoning, I just want to take a step back and talk about kind of what zoning is, what it does do, doesn't do, just to kind of put that context right at the forefront before we talk a little bit further about sustainability in our zoning code. So first off, want to talk about the differences between planning and zoning. A lot of times you hear those two words used interchangeably with one another. On the county level, we have a planning and zoning committee, but they're viewed as more two of the same in terms of terms. But with that said, there are a fair amount of differences between planning and zoning. Planning, kind of taking a 30,000-foot view, left-hand side of the screen here shows our future land use map. That's derived from the city's comprehensive plan, which establishes more of a 20-year-long vision of where we as a city should and ought to be going forward within a variety of different topic areas: housing, transportation, intergovernmental cooperation, utilities, agricultural, cultural, and natural resources, on and on and on. One of those key sections of the comprehensive plan focuses on land use, specifically outlining what are our overarching goals pertaining to land use policy and certain types of land uses that we want to see here in the city going forward. Within the land use chapter, or land use section of our comprehensive plan, as required by state statutes, we as a city were required to adopt what's a future land use map. Image on the left-hand side of the screen is our current future land use map from our 2006 comprehensive plan. What a future land use map says is we're going to create overarching land use categories. It could be residential, commercial, industrial, parkland, institutional uses, et cetera, and apply one of those land use categories to every single property here in the city. How that differs from a zoning code, and zoning, broadly speaking, is a comprehensive plan establishes that overarching vision of what we want to see. What type of land uses we want to see, what type of land uses do we want to see in a certain area of town? What land uses should we prioritize going forward, looking over the next 20 years and onward? Again, more of that vision. A zoning and a zoning code specifically is really, how do we get that done? How do we use the levers, the tools in our toolbox to try to implement what is sought after within our comprehensive plan? So a zoning, broadly speaking, is not as visible. It's less known. It's not the fun, sexy component of land use, but it is really where the rubber hits the road and where you actually see ideas come to fruition. So what is zoning? In the profession that is planning, zoning, land use, one of the common phrases that you hear is, hey, zoning is intended to protect the health, safety, and general welfare of your respective community. That's kind of a one phrase, a short phrase used to describe what zoning is, but it's obviously a lot deeper than that. And what zoning is really one tool of many, but a significant tool nonetheless to achieve, again, what our community's broad goals ultimately are for land use and how we develop property here in the city. Ultimately, what the community's goals are that are interwoven into what a zoning code is based off of everyone here who lives in the city, who shops in the city, who visits the city, anybody who has some stake in the city of Stevens Point, broadly speaking. So what the community goals are pretty open-ended, and that is one of the objectives that I'm looking to gain some clarity on as part of this, these first few months with the zoning code rewrite. Bullet points are a few other examples of what these broad community goals could be environmental and natural resource protection, focusing more on community character and aesthetics. How does the built environment ultimately look like as far as our existing development and future development down the road? Again, it's pretty open-ended in what those community goals ultimately are. As part of zoning, probably this is the thing that's most visible, is a bunch of different colors that's plastered on an aerial view of the city. So this is the city's current zoning map. All the different zoning districts are shown on the right-hand side of the screen. So we have 6 different residential districts, 5 different commercial zoning districts, 2 different industrial zoning districts, and then kind of a scattering of other more secular zoning districts. As part of this zoning code rewrite project, there'll be 2 overarching deliverables. One will be to update this zoning map, applying a new zoning designation for every single property here in the city. And then secondly, we'll be updating the zoning code, which will apply unique regulations to every single zoning district that's established here in the city. So what type of regulations could these be? These could be things like how close a building can be to a property line, how tall a building can be, how much parking would be required for a sort of non-residential development, landscaping requirements, list goes on and on, right? It's a pretty overarching 2 deliverables, and I think I mentioned I have on our project website that this whole rewrite project will probably be a good 2 years plus to complete, and that's intentional because redoing our zoning map and applying regulations to every zoning district that's created, it's going to take a lot of time, and it ought to take a lot of time to be quite deliberative throughout this action. Lastly, and so these are the slides that I just went over are the same slides that I've been presenting through, I think, about half a dozen to 10 neighborhood meetings that I've held so far, starting from about Memorial Day weekend to the present. What I like to do is also include a slide in these presentations talking about the why. The why are we doing the zoning code rewrite in the first place? And there's a few different reasons that's shown on the slide here as to why we as a city are looking to rewrite our zoning code, but there's a few items that stand out. One of them is that our zoning code is, to be blunt, quite old. The last time our zoning code was updated last time our zoning code was rewritten, rather, was in the year 1979. And a lot of codes that are still on the books in our 2025 zoning code are taken straight from the city's first ever zoning code back in the late 1930s. Things like how much setback is required, building setbacks required for our residential zoning districts. It's been on the books for the last 90 plus years, and call me crazy, but a lot of things have happened in the last 90 years as far as how we develop property, what land uses we want where, what our community vision and goals are going forward. And so that's a big reason as part of this rewrite, is to try to take us out of the 20th century and looking forward to the 21st century with this zoning code rewrite. Now, specifically about sustainability, there's a few different areas where we've talked about sustainability in the context of more of the public engagement phase of this rewrite. And that was a really trippy video at the moment. So one of them is, so as part of these last few months, I've been deliberative in terms of how I communicate with the public about this project. Specifically, knowing that there is not one type of communication that's going to reach every single person here in our community, right? I have to be quite deliberative in the different modes of communication that I use to explain this, especially given the gravity of what this code rewrite will be. And so that's why I've had, like I mentioned earlier, maybe 6 to 10 or so neighborhood meetings so far. There's been 3 public surveys that were released this summer so far. First one focusing on housing, second one focusing on transportation, and then the last one focusing on sustainability and site design. So the survey results are included on the project webpage on the city's website, but I encourage you folks, if you haven't looked at it, to take a look at the survey results. These questions, I'll be blunt with you folks, they were taken from a variety of different a variety of other community surveys that other communities have sent out over the years, trying to get overarching sustainability commentary for their respective code rewrites. But really, this is focusing on kind of the different elements that make up sustainability, focusing on natural resource protection, focusing on renewable energy, focusing on how we develop a site and the design considerations that are taking place for new development. So take a look at it. If you have questions, obviously let me know. Transportation, sustainable transportation systems, that was included in here. As well. What I wanted to do, I guess, before kind of taking a pause here for the zoning code rewrite conversation, is I wanted to take a step back and have a little bit of a conversation with you folks about what you want to see here in the city going forward regarding sustainability for land use and future development in the city. I'm asking this knowing that sustainability, as I mentioned, is a broad concept, right? There's a lot to it, and zoning in general is quite a broad area of practice. And so I'm just gonna open it up, open the floor to, I guess, any of you folks, if there's comments that you have about how we're doing right now as it relates to sustainability and land use and development. There's specific things that you would like myself to explore going forward. I'll open it up for thoughts.
Okay, so we'll open up the floor. Who'd like to go first? Sam?
Sure, I'll go first. First, thank you, Adam. This was a great presentation, and loved hearing about how we've got this far on getting these things up to date, the comp plan, the zoning rewrite. I'm pretty excited about where we've got to on this sort of thing. You know, I've been working with you on that since I basically got elected. So this is pretty exciting to see how far we've gotten. One of the things that I know we've talked a little bit about through those conversations is understanding zoning. As we were looking at the property assessment, and I made note of there's no agricultural, but we have a lot of conservation easement. That's part of how we do our forestry. So when we look at our comp plan, we have a plan to have forestry included into this city, and that's part of how we are going to get to our offsets or keep our greenhouse gas emissions kind of at a neutral level. At least that's the goal, is we're going to be putting enough green space into the city to offset what our contributions would be, at least from a city operations sort of standpoint. One of the things that I would hope to understand a little bit more about is what is the zoning of undeveloped land through the, what I see is undeveloped 5M is part of this agricultural forest zoning, and that that 5M zoning I feel has some potential as the carbon sink that had also been discussed. And so I'd just like to know a little bit more about that, and what are the potential of certain rezonings of our conservation, and that, how to say, green space that we're looking at in the future, what we could be doing with that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So the areas that are undeveloped, at least the process that's I guess was taken as part of our current code, is if there's any areas that's currently considered undeveloped, really the first question that was asked is, could it be developed, yes or no? If it couldn't be developed, then really most likely those lots were designated into more of this dark green color, the conservancy zoning districts. If it could be developed into something, then that begs the question, really, what's the most appropriate type of land use for that area, residential, commercial, and onward. I know we talked one-on-one, Sam, about the fact, for example, that we don't have a park zoning district. Right. Most communities have a park zoning district. For whatever reason, we don't. That's one thing I would like to see in the development of the zoning map, is that we explicitly call out what land should be designated for parks and what land should be designated as conservancy land, either because of floodplain considerations or because of high water table issues that leads development to be development to not be feasible, or in the situations as you're describing where there's a vested interest, there's a community-wide interest of keeping that particular chunk of land non-developable, even though it could be. And so I guess the thing I would encourage either you folks individually and folks watching afterwards is, are there specific chunks of land that could be developable that we think as a community ought to remain undeveloped for natural space or just to keep it undeveloped? So, thank you. Any other thoughts, comments?
I'll just also chime in that I do really, really appreciate you doing this, and I appreciate that one of those first surveys was about the sustainability aspects and the sustainability questions. So I think I probably already submitted a bunch of my thoughts there via the survey. I do definitely hope that this is a way that sustainability can be encouraged and to some degree even required in the city. I think kind of at the zoning scale, then probably density is likely to be one of the, the biggest questions is, how do we have a city that can be covered with our bus system, and with people getting around in ways other than, driving individual gasoline-burning cars everywhere. I also, I do like that idea of looking at specific park spaces. You mentioned parks and flooding in the same sentence, and I was thinking about, I used to live in Prairie du Sac, and they'd had some flooding a few years ago, and so they had a couple of parks that were like, I suppose intended as sports fields, so they were just big grassy areas, but they were sunken down like 3 or 4 feet below the surrounding street level, and I strongly suspect that was a deliberate choice to have a spot for potential floodwaters to go other than people's basements. And so I was really pleased to see some of that question of the adaptation in addition to the mitigation. So yeah, I certainly am pleased living in Stevens Point to be in a place that is not likely to be dealing with hurricanes and giant wildfires and et cetera, but who knows what we will see. So any degree that we can consider, potential flooding or other disasters into the plan now before we have more development in places where it's going to lead to loss of money and loss of lives down the road, will be a good thing.
Yeah, and I think kind of branching off that, like when we talked at Surmer Park about if somebody wanted to pave their whole yard, cement, they can, right, technically?
Yeah, if somebody on the books today, hopefully no one's watching this, what I'm about to say. Technically, if someone would approach our office tomorrow and say, I want to pave the entirety of my front yard or backyard, if you want to pave the entirety of your backyard and call it a patio, so long as the concrete or asphalt is at grade, technically there's nothing stopping them from doing so. I can't deny that, right? There's no setback requirement. It can be up to the lot line. There's no buffering whatsoever that would be needed. And I think the question is, yes, that likely is a most likely few, if anybody, would actually do that, right? But should there be protections built into an ordinance to ensure that would never happen, that there wouldn't be any deviations that could, or any wonky projects that could be incorporated that doesn't really meet community ideals?
Yeah, because just kind of like branching off, obviously impermeable surfaces would just contribute to flooding issues, which we're going to be seeing more of. So yeah, definitely either a square foot requirement maybe, or a percentage. I don't know which one would be easier to maybe or at least just make sure that people have to have some type of, permeable surface or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely changing that, or at least putting restrictions on that, I guess.
And that is something that I have been polling in all the neighborhoods so far for these informational meetings is, should we as a city have an impervious surface limit? A fair amount of communities have something incorporated in the ordinance saying, no more than, pick a percent, 80%, let's just say, of your property can be covered with buildings or non-permeable surfaces like driveways, sheds, buildings, those types of features. So
Just to add to that piece of the discussion at our last tour with Joel Lemke. He mentioned how stormwater is managed in the city through primarily infiltration. So in other words, we don't have a stormwater sewer system. So,
Yeah. Which that also kind of can scare me a little bit, I guess. But, yeah, so I mean, we're doing as much as we can to control how much water, I guess, is going down our drains. That's obviously best. And then we also talked about, like, the lighting limits, and I know you talk about that in your survey a lot, too, but I do think that is important for, like, migratory birds and just nature in general. But yeah, I guess those are my big things. And then, yeah, like the preserving the green space. And I am going to probably sit down and just like go on Google Maps and look at our city and figure out areas that are undeveloped that I think that should remain there. Because I think we do have a lot of parks, and I really wanted to visit them all this summer. That was like my goal. I'll have to move that to next summer. Maybe this fall I'll be able to complete it.
First day of fall has not.
That's true. I guess I can still get it done. Okay. But yeah, I mean, we can always, especially as we are expanding, it'll be important, I think, to create more parks, especially as we're like expanding out east, like preserving area out there for more parks. Because we have a lot central and like, I don't know, like I guess like central, Stephen's point. But yeah, as we're developing more area, I think it's important, to incorporate more parks into those types of areas too.
Is anyone talking about, I would not be surprised if they are, and I just know nothing about it, but is anyone talking about like adding extensions to the Green Circle trails? So like, I don't know, more loops to make sure that it continues to be accessible to new developments?
As far as I know, no, unless the Green Circle Trail Board have been having more long-range planning conversations like that. Maybe, but at least as far as I know, there hasn't been.
Yeah, because that is such a wonderful resource for the city and the area that it would be nice to make sure that it continues growing as the city does.
So one of the things, I have maybe like a half dozen or so neighborhood meetings from now through about mid-October. There'll for sure be another public survey out in the coming weeks, most likely focusing on building design. But after that, once we get to about mid-October is when I plan on transitioning towards the drafting stage of the zoning code project. And before I get to that point, I'm planning a special plan commission meeting where I'm going to produce what's called a preliminary policy direction report. This is actually a process that the city of Eau Claire did about a year and a half ago for their zoning code rewrite, which I thought was really a really nice approach for myself and for the elected bodies that be to really have a white paper handy to see when they're looking at draft sections, are you meeting the overarching policy directions that was discussed amongst residents, business owners, et cetera. As part of this policy direction report, I'm going to be talking about like all the different topic areas that folks want to see or don't want to see. Are there certain types of housing that folks want to see more of or less of? Really presenting what these topic areas are, how it is and is not consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and then really the outreach feedback substantiating why that topic, why that policy direction is being included in the report to begin with. With that said, there's going to be, obviously throughout this whole rewrite project so far, there's a lot of topics, there's a lot of ideas that's been presented. For the most part, those topics that were presented, there's general clarity, there's general consensus of where we should go going forward. With that said, there's a few areas where so far, it could change in the next month, but so far there really hasn't been a consensus. So much so that it's going to be up to our plan commission, our elected officials to really provide that direction for me as staff. And one of them so far that I will need some answers on is, I guess, what type of approach do we want to take in certain areas for what type of approach do we want to take to ensure that certain community ideals are being met? Do we want to take kind of a more stick approach, let's just say, and say, for native plantings, let's just say, we could adopt an ordinance like what the city of Verona has that says, it's pretty rigid, pretty strict. You have to provide X number of land, for X percent of landscaping areas that you have, it has to consist of native plantings. Do we as a community want to go that approach? Do we want to take a middle ground approach where we say, in certain areas of town, we want to prioritize a certain type of regulation, if it's, again, the native plantings, if it's EV charging systems, if it's illumination standards or impervious surface limits? Do we want to focus only on certain areas? Or for the third option, do we want to take more of a incentive-based or a performance-based approach? Meaning that if you meet some of these design standards as part of new development, there might be some leniency or some deviation in code requirements elsewhere. If it's parking requirements, building setback requirements, pick a code requirement, right? And so that's going to be something that I will need some clarity on, unless things change over the next few weeks. So regarding sustainability, what I'm curious, just overarching, right, there's a lot of topic area, there's a lot of ideas that we talked about over the last few minutes. I guess what type of approach should we take in your opinion? Should we take more of a carrot approach or a stick approach in seeing some of those sustainability goals come to light in our zoning ordinance? Is there any perspectives that folks have?
I would say that I think because there's so many potential issues that you need to deal with, and then if you're going to utilize the private market, I often think you're going to have a combination of sticks and incentives. There isn't going to be an incentive for things that really should be done. And if that's the case, and that's how you need to do it, you need to just say so and make that a requirement. So I think it's a combination.
Okay. Do other folks agree with that, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's some stuff that we're definitely going to be, a little bit more rigid on and not want to be flexible on, I guess. But obviously, you attract more flies with honey kind of thing too. So it's like, you kind of, I think it'll be kind of like a split.
And let me ask you this. I mean, I think that can be kind of hard to figure out when you're trying to put it together into a code. And so can you have a process whereby you get 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, your staff has flexibility to sort of massage the requirements and the incentives in order to accomplish the objective?
Short answer, yes. And that's, I think, something that might be overlooked as part of this zoning code rewrite process, is that, say, a year and a half, 2 years from now, the new zoning code is adopted. It doesn't mean that it is locked in and there's no opportunity to change it down the road. If the council wants to tweak that ordinance a month later, they are at liberty to do so as long as they follow the statutory process. So that's a great point. I mean, if there's something in the code that, 6 months later we realize, hey, we'd rather take more of a heavy-handed approach, or hey, we should be more lenient, absolutely, it would be the council's pleasure to change it as they see fit.
It kind of gives me pause. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Because something that kind of has come up is our water and our border agreements with the surrounding communities, and say carrots and sticks kind of thing. And if we want to take a heavier hand on certain things, one of the things that where do those like exceptions and deviations kind of lie within our things. Have we made certain agreements that, so we zone a certain thing a certain way, and, well, that's fine, except we have another thing, there's another overlay, and we might have to go, well, we might want to say something different here about, our groundwater might have some sort of things that are worth, like, clarifying. And I'd say that's something, as I was looking at our our sewer service SSA thing.
Yeah.
It's like, some of that stuff to me, I feel like it's due for some updates and some clarity on that. We've adopted some things. Now we're updating our comp plan. How are those things that we adopted in like 2023, I think is what it was, this have now affected that. And so maybe there's some things that need to be updated as well, because when we look at our, let's say, neighbors, and we want to respect something like a most restrictive, the most restrictive use that we've agreed to on something, maybe that's something that's there that deserves to be looked at.
Yeah, and that's a great point in that zoning, broadly speaking, is not viewed on a secular basis where it's the city and the city alone. I didn't mention this, but as part of this rewrite project, not only the zoning code would be rewritten, but also the sign code and the subdivision code. We have written in our sign code already saying one of the overarching objectives of our sign code is to have uniform sign regulations, not only for the city, but also for the village of Plover and the broader Portage County region. So if you're driving along Highway 10, driving along I-39, there is consistency and not a significant amount of contrast in what types of signs, how tall signs are, how big signs are, the illumination levels of those signs. So yeah, and there's been collaboration so far with this zoning code rewrite. Portage County, thankfully, is going through a zoning code rewrite right now, and they're at literally the same timeline as we are. So I met with about a handful of county planning and zoning staff about 2 weeks ago to talk about their timeline, their overarching goals, and ways that the city and the county can collaborate together as part of our respective rewrites.
Excellent.
But going back to, at least there's comments so far about, it depends on the certain area. There's some pieces of regulation where we should be more restrictive, some areas where we should be more lenient. Are there certain sustainable practices that you think we ought to be more, take more of the stick approach, that you think we should be a little bit more heavy-handed in? You folks have kind of said it depends on the issue. Are there any specific issues that come to mind as ones that we should be more?
Groundwater. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, because this is kind of your broader question about carrot versus stick is something I'm a little torn about, because I think, people do tend to respond more positively to carrots than sticks.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we are in a global crisis where the Earth has already warmed up to a dangerous degree, and hundreds, if not thousands, of people are dying all the time because of the climate change fueled disasters. And at some point, I think it is fair to say we need to be doing something, and yes, let's do it. And at the same time, a lot of the things that I think would fall under that are not actually the things that fall under a zoning code rewrite.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know, if we were allowed to say that every new building in the city has to have enough solar on its roof to run the building, that would be awesome. But I don't think, even if that is something that would be covered with zoning rules, which I doubt it is, I think that's a little beyond what anybody would be ready to accept at all at this point. So I would say that really anything that deals with making this a community that produces fewer greenhouse gases is worth saying, yes, we have to do this. And maybe it's just my own biases, but it's like native plants are lovely. They are not solving climate change. So that is what I would put in the category of nice, but maybe we can let people make their own choices to a greater degree on that one.
And if you thought zoning was confusing already, wait, here's more. So not only, there's a lot of layers, obviously, through all this. One of the layers that is and will have to be considered is the statutory discretion that we have to regulate certain things the way that we want to. So using
Talking with Lynn, I think there's like a whole category of layers of, you cannot mandate EV chargers, but you can like mandate the channels that could be used to install EV chargers later, stuff like that.
Yeah, so that was a change in state law maybe about a year and a half ago. Prior to that point, we could, in our zoning code, we could have said for every, spitballing, say, for every 20 parking stalls that are provided, there has to be one EV charging station. Because of that change in law, we cannot adopt an ordinance like that. That would be against our statutory discretion. So communities, in a way to try to get around that, what they've done is adopt an EV-ready ordinance that says, okay, knowing we can't require the installation of charging stations, we're going to require for developments to install the electrical conduit underneath the asphalt so that effectively 80% of the project is completed as part of getting occupancy for a given land use. So much so that it kind of encourages and pushes a property owner to complete the other 20% either now or sometime down the road, so that it would meet really the stated intention from the get-go.
Is that kind of how we strategize for things like our getting our neighbors that have wells and septic tanks onto our storm and sewer? Just like, eventually you're gonna have to like hook up. So how we kind of encourage that is like, all right, we're gonna put in water mains down this new development, and we're gonna put in the infrastructure. Whether you hook up or not, that's kind of on you for a time, but.
Yeah, and that's been the conversation. I mean, that's a conversation, going back to intergovernmental cooperation, that's a conversation that would have to take place not only with the city, but really also the county as well. So right now, in our subdivision code and the county subdivision code, non-sewered, lots not connected to a municipal utilities, there's a minimum lot size of 2 acres, right? One of the things that we have currently is if there's a lot that can be annexed into the city that's directly adjacent to the city's corporate boundaries and is not connected to municipal utilities, if say they need to dig a new well or their septic tank needs to get replaced, they are all but forced under the county ordinance to annex into the city and hook up to city utilities if they are contiguous or if they are directly adjacent to the city. So I mean, that's ultimately that's one example where with the county going through their zoning code rewrite process as well, that's definitely going to be a conversation over the next several months. Or, you know, what subdivision regulation should we have for non-sewered lots to ensure you have groundwater concerns that are addressed while also making sure some of the more of the stormwater management features would still be met. And going back to your comment earlier, Heather, about you gave the example of solar panels on a roof. This is one area that's going to be very tricky depending on what sort of building design standards, if any, are incorporated into a new zoning code. What I mean by that is there was some case law within the last year or two pertaining to what building features a municipality could regulate as part of a zoning ordinance. Thinking specifically City of Madison and their bird-friendly window ordinance. All municipalities, they're required to adopt the respective residential and commercial building codes. Madison adopted their bird-friendly, bird-safe window ordinance, and there was a challenge through the court system by either a developer down in the Madison area or some group closely similar to them, challenging the city's ordinance, saying that that's kind of going over, that's an overstep effectively. And so what the court decided was ultimately is a municipality could regulate building features that are more stringent than what a building code will require, so long as it's not considered health safety items. The issue is ultimately, what do you consider health safety? That's kind of a very broad analogy, a very broad
Category?
category. Yes, thank you. Right, you know, is the type of roofing material that you have, is that life safety? Windows, for example, is that considered life safety? You know, the requirement of having tempered glass if it's so close to a bathroom, for example, right? And so that's one of the fine lines that are going to have to be towed as part of this zoning code rewrite and any municipal zoning code rewrite here in the state, of making sure you're still compliant with limitations on the state and federal level. So, I know we went down a little bit of a segue here, but I guess, is there any other thoughts that folks had about carrot stick approach or just broad sustainable principles that you would like me to explore further?
I've been approached about having us explore dark skies, or adopting some sort of like light intrusion, light trespassing ordinance. A bit of it comes from concerns about our energy usage and how certain like street lights sometimes are like considered to be a bit too bright by a neighbor to it. And something they brought up is, I'm a colorblind person, so again, like different colors of lights for our street lights at night, apparently like purple, I guess, is what I'm being told. Yeah. Doesn't attract like these night migratory bats, and it seems to be less intrusive into people's homes as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that, illumination standards is something that communities have adopted. And that's one of the things I've referenced through these neighborhood meetings is, we have 3 older persons here in the room. One of the review criteria that they are required to look at for new development, new land uses, is making sure that there isn't too intense of light onto adjacent properties. We require for development plans that there's a photometric plan, so a photometric plan that's included that shows the intensity of a light at many different areas of the property. The issue is, in our current zoning code, we don't explicitly outline along the street lot line, side lot lines, rear lot line, or anywhere in between what level is considered too much, what level is considered the maximum. And so, frankly, for the elected officials in the room, it's really a subjective analysis of what's considered too bright and what's not. And through these conversations that I've been having so far, really what I'm trying to get squared away is that something that you folks value, yes or no? If that's something you don't value, cool, I would advise us striking that as a review consideration for development. If that is something that we value, okay, then we should put some teeth on it to at least make the review of developments a lot easier for staff like myself and our elected officials. So.
Yeah, I vote somebody picks some lux limits and gives that some objective measure and goes with it.
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to see some, say, study on that where, say, what the effects of adopting that has become on like how long reviews take and say just the burden that it would put onto staff if we were to adopt something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it, would it, just conceptually, would it add more time as part of the internal review? Not necessarily, because it's just a matter of cross-referencing a plan relative to a table in our zoning code to make sure you fall within the minimums and maximums. Really, I think the biggest effect as part of this is it would result in a more clear analysis by myself and ultimately you folks, Plan Commission, Council, and saying, does this meet the review criteria set out in our code? So.
Does anybody else have something they want to add to that broad issue that we need to consider for zoning code rewrites? One thing I would want to add is the concept of equity across all citizens that live in the city or who might want to live in the city. And it's kind of the overarching goal is the state of Wisconsin has a workforce shortage, has a potentially shrinking population, and is shrinking in many parts of the state. That's both a problem and an opportunity for a city like Stevens Point. But Point needs workers, right? And so when we talk about this idea of zoning and zoning code specifications, are they equitably distributed across all income levels, for instance? Is there, in fact, affordable housing? Is that being created when there's development or redevelopment? Because we need workers, right? And some of those workers work in low-wage jobs, but we need to have them. So where do they get to live in the city? And do they have access to some of the same opportunities that this code provides in other areas? A lot of what we just discussed, tonight. So.
Yeah, so you're asking if they have the opportunity to
Yeah.
speak their truths, speak their perspectives through kind of the same conversation that we're having here?
Yeah, be able to have adequate housing, be able to live in a nice neighborhood.
Yeah.
A neighborhood that's also going to, be, I look around and I see what the city does, like with street construction and reconstruction, and it's kind of nice to see them working across the city. They're not favoring one area of the city over the other, right? And so this is a topic that I've had brought up to me several times from different people saying, in your sustainability commission, you need to be talking about equity too, to make sure all citizens are participating in the sustainability or have access to that as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the beauties with zoning is, we have to create this zoning map. And so we can narrowly tailor specific objectives to a particular area of town, depending on what the neighborhood or the community as a whole wants to see for a small, finite area of the city. For example, red shaded areas here on the map, that's so kind of up where my cursor is on the north side of town, along Church Street, Stanley Street, that's zoned our B4 commercial district. For the properties that are zoned in this red shaded color, multifamily would require a conditional use permit, so has to go before our Plan Commission and Council for consideration. Sam mentioned overlay districts earlier, and I didn't touch that because that's a whole other layer to this, but there's one overlay district that currently is on the books focusing on our Division Street corridor, and one of the things that's included as part of that overlay district is that it makes multifamily housing permitted by right? Because that was one of the objectives sought out in the creation of our Division Street Target Area Master Plan, of something we want to prioritize as far as land use going forward. And so this is really the conversations that I've been having through these neighborhood style conversations so far, as what's the future of say, certain transportation corridors going forward. I was talking with Allison just before the start of the meeting here that we'll be having a informational meeting next week with the zoning code rewrite focusing on the Church Street and Patch Street corridors. And one of the things that we were talking about is, well, what's the grand vision of the Patch Street corridor going forward? Is it viewed, should it be viewed as a commercial corridor going forward, an industrial corridor going forward? Right? Those are the conversations that I'm looking to have through these neighborhood meetings that I hope people, I'm really glad, I'm really happy with the amount of people who have attended so far. But that's really the answers that I want to get, because that's going to be quite informative for me in creating this map and creating the code. So short end, I know that was a long way of saying, yes, you can narrowly tailor whatever we want to see in certain areas of the city because of us requiring to make this zoning map.
Okay. Anyone else?
I just love that quote from you right now, because we need people to show up to this stuff, and we need the public feedback, and it's when we talk about tailoring it to the needs, we need those voices, and I've been very happy to see what we got for turnout so far, but we could always use more.
100%. Yeah, and that's why I mentioned this at the jump, that as much as I would like to say that every single person is going to participate as part of this or is going to be made aware of this, there's probably always going to be one person who wouldn't. That's just the unfortunate reality. With that said, my responsibility so far as part of this code rewrite is to make sure that I'm being diverse in how I communicate this project to everybody, right? Using mail as the primary means of communication. That reaches a certain audience, but it doesn't reach others. Same with social media, same with signage, same with person-to-person correspondence through their elected officials, right? My response is really to use all of those types of communication and then some to try to reach as big of an audience as you can. Because this ain't light stuff. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. So. All right.
Okay.
So then the next second half, the greenhouse gas inventory, this won't be as long here. So just a refresher here. So I think the latter part of last year, the city was awarded a planning grant through the Public Service Commission's Energy Innovation Grant Program for the purpose of the city, as well as about, I think, 24 or so communities as part of the Wisconsin Local Government Climate Coalition to produce a greenhouse gas inventory for their respective communities. And so this is something that's been working on kind of behind the scenes in the weeds over the last several months, but that is to collect a wide swath of different data and then manipulate and use the data as desired by folks just like you to forecast really where we want to go going forward and use certain indicators to see if that will help or hurt certain greenhouse gas emissions that are generated. So I'm going to flip back and forth between the slide deck and the Chrome here. So just wanting to start out by talking about just the different types of data that has been accumulated so far. Let me zoom back. I'm not going to get everything on the screen. I apologize for that. So the tabs on the bottom of the slide here, I'm sure you folks can see, unless you got really good lighting, really good vision rather. Really the items that's shown on the screen here are the different data categories where data was collected as part of this greenhouse gas inventory. So talking about our electrical grid, our stationary energy, focusing on our transportation for on-road and off-road emissions, focusing on land use, wastewater, industrial processes, effluents that are emitted. I'm just going to pick one of these areas just as an example. So this is the stationary energy item. So just to give a flavor of the different types of data that was collected. So this was given all from our local utility, WPS. So this focuses on, you can see here, the different types of fuel that's used for our respective housing units here in the city. So the differentiation between the number of units and their respective source of heating. And then as well here, kind of spacing it out for our housing stock, kind of separating that further based off of if it's a apartment complex or if it's a single family home. And obviously the list kind of goes on and on for the different areas here that I mentioned earlier, and that's shown on the bottom of the screen here.
So remind us how much this data you're collecting is city operations versus, because it looked like for the electricity and heating you were showing, that is the entire community. But for vehicle miles traveled, I don't even know how one would begin to collect that information for the entire community.
Yeah, so all of the data that's been collected is community-wide in focus. None of the data points collected is focused just on municipal operations.
Okay.
Specific to transportation, I believe some of the data was taken from the census as far as obviously the various types of questions that were asked as part of the census. Take that with a grain of salt, especially utilizing the 2020 census. But yeah, there's obviously some margin of error taken with this type of data collection, as well as really any type of more large-scale data collection like this. But going back to the screen here, so really this goal is, the whole purpose of this greenhouse gas inventory is twofold. One being to collect all the data from the different sources, either different city departments like our utility data we can take straight from Director Lemke, our utility department, WPS, gathering a lot of the electrical data, for example. That's really the first phase, collecting all the data. The second phase then was inputting this into our software system, ICLEI's ClearPath tool, to put everything into one spot and then use the various forecasting methods that will really be of assistance for you folks in forecasting where you want to go going forward and really aiding in the development of the climate action plan at some point down the road. So I'll pull up the ClearPath tool in a little bit, but so one of the things on the main screen here, so the most recent data that we could accumulate is from 2023. So this slide option, or this box right up here, shows the total amount of emissions based off of these different categories: energy, transportation, waste, industrial, and onward. Obviously the ag and forestry is not as relevant, just given that we're a municipality versus that of a county government that's taking a look at this. But so this is just the broad emissions inventory from 2023 for these different areas. And within these broader topic areas, you can siphon it down into specific, more specific features. For example, here we have the commercial and industrial emissions. You can see the breakdown between commercial and industrial. And then for energy consumption, you can see for commercial and institutional energy consumption, what type of energy is being consumed for those types of land uses between electricity, oil, natural gas. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of different sources that are used.
And is it that the 2024 data is yet to come for this project, or is it that it won't be available until 2026?
little bit of both. There's some of the data that we have right now, we just don't have everything. You know, for example, the data from WPS, we can't really get until quarter 3, quarter 4 for the previous year's data. So really my goal is once we have all the data at our disposal, yes, we'll input the 2024 data so we can see more of the trend lines for all these different areas. So this is the actual tool path, ClearPath tool itself. So, you know, you saw this table earlier looking at our emissions inventory by the different broad topic areas. And you can see it's broken down into these different areas. So waste, for example, you can see disposal of solid waste, biological, incineration, wastewater management, list goes on and on. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring up this ClearPath tool is you can use the dashboard and
Once it loads.
there we go. Once it loads. I was getting a little nervous if it was just going to crash on me. One of the things that's nice is the infographics that are included as part of this platform. So this is the dashboard showing our different types of emissions relative and the different types of emissions and the categories where those emissions are coming from. Again, stationary energy, transportation, and then these last two. One of the nice things is in this portal, if you want to tinker and highlight what your overall goal is, say in the next 10 years, how much of these total emissions do we want to reduce? You can plot this out through graphic, through these more visual representations to see what that looks like, and you can tinker within these specific elements which areas are low-hanging fruit to achieve that reduction goal going forward. The transitions is the area specifically where if you want to set aside, let's just say, your emission targets for personal mobility. You can set specific numbers really from now through, let's see, the farthest outward that they can give you is 2050. So if you want to set specific targets, you can plot this out within this portal, and then through the dashboard here, you can show that in visual terms what that actually looks like. So this, as part of this energy innovation grant that was awarded to the city, that funded in part the usage of this ClearPath tool for the data collection phase. So for really this year through, I think, the end of the year. If this is something that you want to utilize this program beyond the year 2025, there would be a fee associated with it. I think it's, for a community our size, it's just north of $1,000. If there's interest, if you want to explore this more, I guess let me know. I can kind of talk with you more one-on-one to have you kind of play around with this a little bit more. But if there is interest in you folks wanting to utilize this platform beyond 2025, I'd say probably talk to the two elected officials on the commission as far as having a budget allocation for that.
That was going to be my question. Would I have to talk to our comptroller, get something as an item to fund that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't know necessarily what line item that would come from, should there be interest. So I'm just telling you this right now since you're kind of in the early stages of the budget process for 2026. So if there is an interest in the commission having access to this platform for years down the road, starting in 2026.
Who would all have access to this?
I know I can have multiple parties under the same account. So really, I guess it would be up to you folks as a commission who would want to have access to it. You know, I think for sure you would want to have one city staff person, because some of the data that would be required for collection year in and year out would have to come from the city, like the utility data. But really, it's up to you folks for who should have access to this in years ahead. But yeah, it's nothing, I guess, maybe not something you need to answer now. I think just something to think
Maybe that's
either
for
now or in the back of your mind is,
agenda
do you want to have access to this platform post 2025? And if so, I guess kind of give the directive to Sam and Allison to talk to the appropriate parties that be to have that be a budget request.
So I guess the only thing I want to point out is, we're only a couple of months away from the new year. And so,
Right.
and from a budget standpoint, you probably got to make that decision pretty quick, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously this is not guaranteeing, if the commission says, yes, we want access to this, it
Right.
obviously doesn't guarantee you will when all is said and done. It's ultimately up to the council in adopting the budget if that line item is appropriated.
So if it wasn't extended into 2026, would we have some data or some kind of report we could look at or use?
Yeah, this is all this data we could download and send to all of you. It's just you wouldn't be able to add data into the platform for 24, 25 and onward, nor would you be able to kind of manipulate the data either.
So we're kind of, but I kind of wanted to, after your topic, wanted to just briefly say to the board that we need to decide as we come up on the end of 2025, what we want to try to do in 2026. And this seems to be related to that. And I guess that's kind of the big question. Do we feel we need to have this tool available for our purposes of this commission? Sounds like at a minimum, we would at least have data from 2025. But I mean, what do you think? I mean, do we want to have this tool to be able to make some projections beyond that, or, in addition to that, in order to accomplish our purposes, I guess is what I'm getting at.
So one of the things just as a sidebar, one of the things that I was kind of tinkering with this as you spoke, Chair, is you can preset certain indicators to say, hey, if we adopt or if we incorporate this sort of policy, what would be the effect? So I was just playing around. So, you had the goal of emission reduction for commercial buildings. If there was a shift to heat pumps in commercial buildings and you select a certain target of how many buildings you want to have that shift apply to, it would plot out what sort of impact that would have as far as emission reductions. So, quick sidebar. So I just wanted to point that out.
So extremely useful.
Okay, so somebody made that comment. I mean, that's what it sort of strikes me as, especially if you're trying to make recommendations in a report. Say in 2026 sometime, what do we think the city needs to focus on? There's 1,000 things you could focus on, but we're going to have to probably prioritize, right? So this might be one of those tools that's going to help you. I mean, we talked about this from the very beginning of formation of the commission about the need to understand our greenhouse gas inventory. What's our baseline? And then off of that information, you could see, okay, where are the biggest emitters, where are the smallest emissions, but where can you have maybe the biggest impact? And then we were just talking about zoning code rewrites and things like that. I mean, it sort of helps inform a lot of different policy discussions and decision-making process if you're trying to figure out how to reduce your footprint and mitigate, and be sustainable as a community in dealing with climate change.
Yeah, those visual representations that you get to see of the impact of policy or mechanical choices that you make, that is going to be a powerful tool to convey its impact both to the public and to the decision makers within the city. So I would recommend that we use this. So kudos to you for being part of a grant that's working on this. Is there any other follow-up grants that come from this? Has the city applied for any other IGIP funding for stuff like this at all?
Nothing following this at all.
Okay.
I would definitely like to sit down with you at some point and play around with this. I almost wonder if we need to have this be a specific agenda item on one of our upcoming meetings about just spending time as a commission with this tool, trying out a bunch of these options and running a bunch of these simulations and seeing what we figuring this out as a commission.
Is there, training or tutorial videos available with this or things like that?
Yeah, that's definitely something I could send to you really tomorrow even. It might be hard to apply the training videos to, so that it's useful if you don't have access to the platform in front of you while you're watching the video.
So I might ask, is this the best tool? Or is there something out there that we might want to explore rather than trying to continue with this?
I'm sure there's other tools. This was ultimately selected by the Wisconsin Local Government Climate Coalition communities, in part because there's other communities in the state who have been using this the same platform in the past. So Green Bay, Milwaukee are two communities that stand out that have been using this over the last couple of years already. So,
is it possible to do any comparisons with their data, like see how we compare?
yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why we as a coalition joined together in seeking grant funding for this, is that we could compare communities and see what strategies could we emulate based off of the successes that they've had. So,
Are you able to compare different municipalities of like the same size? Or
yeah, so the short answer, yes.
okay. Because I think that would be helpful too. And if we're able to, like, obviously not having spent any time in this program, but like if it also, I guess, like lists or shows what other communities like of our size have gotten done, I think that would also help to, I guess, prove our point, or at least kind of help us
Build a foundation.
Yeah, and like just help us with our goals and stuff, to be like, hey, this, like, they decided to do this here and this was the result. Just to have like some testimonials, I guess.
Sure.
But yes, of the same size is a good point. It's like we could trumpet from the rooftops that we have smaller emissions than Milwaukee, but
Right.
that wouldn't mean much.
Right. It's like, I just want to know where we sit, across the state, I guess.
So question for Adam then is, does that sound feasible in 2026? And we don't need to try and set a specific month or date or anything, but, could the commission have a meeting where we just run through this greenhouse gas inventory using this tool to, run some scenarios or do some?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so like, one comparable community that comes through my mind is City of Middleton. I actually just looked to verify their population. They're about 2,000 individuals less than us, but obviously there's differences between the two, them being a suburb of a very large city in Madison compared to us. But I mean, yes, there's a few communities that are pretty close to us.
Actually, because my family lives in, town of Middleton, if we wanted to try and have presumably a Zoom meeting with people from the town of Middleton sustainability, I could probably get that, help making that happen.
Okay. Do you want to research that?
Sure.
Actually, would probably be a good segue for you guys with item 7. I know, jumping ahead, but.
Yep, no, that was what I was, thinking, yes.
Taking a lot of order.
Yeah, otherwise, I mean, that's really the kind of the skinny of the greenhouse gas inventory. Like I said, ultimately, if it's a goal of the commission in the future to create a climate action plan for our community, having this greenhouse gas inventory is really the first step. So, yeah, seeing where we're at and then plotting out these certain scenarios to see what's most effective. That would be a really good first step in outlining what specific goals you want to include in a climate action plan.
Thanks, Adam.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess we kind of jumped ahead to agenda item 7, but.
Okay, so is that about it as far as the greenhouse gas presentation then, or is there anything else?
Yes, that's all that I have.
Okay. All right. And if there aren't any more discussion on that, then I'll move on to, I was going to just kind of combine item 6 and item 7. Just kind of more of an update and sort of a brainstorming here, but I did send out today the tour notes for our tour of the Public Works garage in July, and then also the utilities and wastewater treatment plant in August. And that was just a laundry list of notes that I took. It's not an open meeting kind of thing. It's just a collection of notes. We don't have to approve it or anything. I just wanted to kind of capture what we saw on the tour, if that's useful information in the future when we circle back. Because the other thing too is I met with the new Focus on Energy liaison that also works with the city of Stevens Point. And that is Sylvia Lopez. And she's also a graduate of UWSP. And she knows some of the professors and players and has many connections. I was pretty impressed. But she replaced the person that retired. Maybe earlier this summer, you saw a press release from the mayor's office that sort of compiled the list of previous Focus on Energy grants that the city had. And sort of compiled that. The guy that retired, he wanted to just sort of put all that together as a summary of what was accomplished through Focus on Energy. And so that's what he did in the mayor's office, put that out, and I think I sent that out to everybody. But there is the new liaison, Sylvia Lopez, as I mentioned, and she also has connections with some other folks that possibly we might want to have conversations with in 2026. So that's really all I wanted to mention. And then on the schedule, as far as presentations through the end of this year, in October, we're going to meet with police and fire. And that's going to kind of wrap up our review of city operations. And if you look back through the notes on our meetings with the different city departments and everything and talking about this topic of sustainability, we've been compiling a lot of good information about what we've accomplished as a city and what we've done as far as sustainability or reducing our power use, efficiencies, kind of along the operational lines. What Adam was talking about tonight was more along the lines of the larger community and kind of those non-city operational issues that are out there. And so Sylvia connected me with Austin Holland. He's with UW Extension and Center for Land Use Education. And he made a number of different points, and when he said when you're talking about sustainability and how you want to move as a community on sustainability, he said don't forget about the social equitable community sustainability impacts. Like, for example, how do you keep your downtown a vibrant place and not fall into disrepair? Okay. How do you make sure all members of the community participate? So I mentioned earlier this issue of affordable housing. Okay, so the city has to be a place where everybody from all income levels can live and be successful. So those were some of his points. Other points are, what are we doing as far as regional cooperation with Plover, Whiting, Park Ridge? How are we connecting with that? We talked about the county's cooperation. So that's also part of that big picture. So those may be topics or areas that we need to explore a little more in 2026. And so we also mentioned Heather's going to research a meeting with Middleton. We're going to look at using that greenhouse gas tool. So those are some of the things we can get on the agenda for 2026. But I want you to think about, what kind of topics beyond, city operations now. Now, if there's still something there, that's fine. Let's circle back. But where do we need to go in 2026, I guess is what I'm getting at. How do we want to proceed? Where do we want to start digging into and start formulating, what our plan is going to look like, I guess. If that makes sense? I'm thinking, we've kind of been in the data collection stage, and we're still going to need to do some of that, but then how do we want to start getting into putting together some sort of plan and putting some flesh on the bones there? So I'm going to need input, especially when we get into January, because when we're planned out through the end of the year. We're going to have Dave Barbier from the UWSP Office of Sustainability, and then Sylvia is going to come in December to talk about focus on energy. And currently, she's trying to schedule a meeting with the mayor just to introduce herself, and she would like to connect with the city departments and such to just sort of keep that program going along, like what we had accomplished, and seeing what more there is that the city could accomplish. So I guess as far as all the persons and stuff, if you want to touch base with the mayor and just say, hey, maybe we need to meet with Sylvia and get her going. The thing I was impressed by is the youthful energy. This is a person that wants to accomplish some things, so why not put her to work? So that's what I'm kind of getting at, and that's what I'm kind of asking the alders here is like, let's see if we can get her plugged in with city departments or whatever she needs. She just needs permission to go, So she's kind of on the outside, but she's looking in and saying, what can I do for you? So maybe we should entertain that, right? So anyway, that's kind of it for items 6 and 7, as far as what I want to say. So that's what I want us to, as a commission, if you can just give me that feedback on how we want to fill in as we get into 2026, where we want to get started. And I can touch base with Adam as far as when the appropriate time is to work on that climate or that greenhouse gas tool, as far as working with your schedule, because you're busy. So we want to just be able to coordinate. But I don't know, do you have any feedback for me as far as what are you doing, or maybe you should focus on this, or, anything you want to, or if you want to email that to me, you don't want to say it in public.
Well, one thing that we haven't really tackled, thinking about the next year, is food waste diversion.
Okay.
Sort of thing, whether it's residential, whether it's commercial, where's that going? Is it a feedstock for agricultural operations? Is it a composting environment?
Rather than having it go in the landfill, which is
Exactly.
pretty much what it's doing right now, right?
Feeds into everything when we talk about greenhouse gases. And another topic that we loosely talked about a while ago is our whole approach to solid waste management, whether it's landfilling versus recycling. They're all kind of combined. I think those are some topics we should probably tackle.
Okay. And could I have you sort of draw the picture for, and possibly, who do we want to have or who do we want to invite?
It's already done.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Let me know when you want to put it, where you want it on the calendar.
Sure.
Sounds great. Okay.
I'm assuming in November when Dave's going to present, I'm assuming he's going to be talking about the campus climate action plan process.
Yeah, so what Dave, what I was thinking he was going to present was going to talk about UWSP's climate action planning and then his thoughts on potential collaboration with the city.
Yeah, because those two topics that you brought up, I mean, those are conversations that were had
Yeah.
a while now regarding the campus's climate action plan. And I think that would be valuable for him to talk about the methodology and the process that was taken for those two areas.
Correct. And, that could inform the city or our commission as far as how we maybe want to make sure that we're in sync or collaborate with the university system. Because there could be a lot of synergy there potentially. But I'm thinking what you're talking about, though, is not necessarily what Dave is going to be covering, but almost a separate topic about what does the city do and what does the city need to do with its contractors and its hauler and its, that whole operation, correct? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, exactly, because I think it bleeds into all of these other topics that we've been discussing and hearing about and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And, I'm guessing when we talk about food waste, from what I know about that, is that can be a significant contributor to landfill and greenhouse gas emissions in landfills. And if we're going to do anything about that, we got to do something about keeping the green out of the trash. So.
It's the largest contributor.
Largest.
So
okay.
Makes sense to tackle it.
Okay, excellent. I'll rely on you to help set up that topic.
I'm going to rope in Allison, too, at the same time.
All right, excellent. Okay, is there anything else anybody wants to bring up?
One of the things that I found interesting as we were going through our field trips was understanding how our fleet planning can be part of this greenhouse gas reduction priority setting and how that fits into it when, certain vehicles may be more, say, we might want to get at a certain type of vehicle in our fleet before others, that kind of thing, understanding what might be part of, say, where's the juiciest chunks in our fleet to get at, where's the biggest emitters are, and what would possibly be the financial advantages of coming up with a plan to, say, have a revolving sort of fleet plan, so we aren't spending on maintenance costs and we're utilizing, let's say, the planning aspect to keep our carbon footprint lower.
So with fleet management, fleet replacement, what are we doing to bring in electric hybrids?
Possibly, yes, there, where
to
they make sense.
To reduce our greenhouse gas footprint?
Sure. That was just one of the things that I was talking to him about is the cost savings. When we're looking at trying to implement some of these other things, if we're spending money on that fleet, basically throwing money at maintenance when we could be getting into a newer vehicle that doesn't have that maintenance by having a plan to trade it in at a certain date, get that value, understanding the type of vehicles that make sense for the fleet. That was one of the discussions that I found very interesting was we could probably get towards some of these hybridized vehicles in the fleet if we could plan towards getting newer vehicles in the fleet more often, because the maintenance costs are where we start to lose. It's a diminishing return sort of thing.
Okay, those are some great ideas to explore. Yeah. And I think that kind of gets at when we talk about pulling together plans and priorities, that would be in my mind, one of those big priorities that you would want city to focus on. let's do this.
Yeah, studying it to understand the, like, let's say, the justifications to pursue that.
Okay. Anything else folks have?
Did our other alder who came here tonight have anything they'd like to suggest for upcoming?
Mostly, I just want to say that I pretty much agree with the priorities that we've set tonight. I think that as an elected official with the city right now, I think the fleet is probably the top priority for what we look at over the longer term to try and make some of these emissions goals. Looking at that piece of software earlier, I also want to say I think that that can really be sort of a guiding tool here as we look at what to prioritize. I mean, one of my biggest questions coming into our pledge for zero emissions by 2050 is how do we know if we're on track? How do we know if we're there 20 years before we need to be there? That seems like a really powerful tool to identify that. I would really like to see us sort of use that more in just the rest of 2025 to sort of help identify what we want those priorities to be, since we have that sort of future modeling capability right now. Excites me as an IT admin to see the power of tools like that. But yeah, in general, I think that the fleet is probably the most obvious option. I would like to see us, I guess, start there, since that will probably be one of the potentially harder changes to make as well, harder changes to advocate for within the city. So the more that we can sort of start that conversation now, I think will benefit us in the longer term.
Agreed.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, if there isn't anything else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second?
Okay, so motion by Allison. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.